Agreed to. I'll call the member for Fisher.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I rise with great gusto and enjoyment to speak on this very important bill. And it's unfortunate that the member for Melbourne has left the chamber, because I was hoping to be able to set him straight on a couple of things, because unfortunately he totally, perhaps understandably, he totally misunderstands the intent and the effect of this bill entirely. He talks about why it is that, in his opinion, this government is not applying the same strict standards across the board. Of course, he's fundamentally wrong on that, because on this side of the chamber we believe in the rule of law and we believe that no one is above the law. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, I've spoken in this place very often in my short time here about union corruption. And I speak with some degree of authority, because having worked in the building industry both as a carpenter and joiner, as a builder, as an adjudicator, as a mediator and as a barrister for 30 years in the building industry, there's not too much that I haven't seen in the building industry that hasn't come across my desk. And I can tell the chamber without a shadow of a doubt that the building industry in this country is racked with corruption, absolutely racked with corruption. And that's why, on this side of the House, we have been so forceful in trying to clean up the industry, because it impacts upon every single citizen. Every single taxpayer in this country is paying a cost. It is paying a margin for union malfeasance. When you look at the budget that was announced just 2 weeks ago, this country is about to embark on its largest infrastructure expenditure over the next 10 years, some $75 billion. And we on this side of the House are very proud to be part of a government that is putting its money where its mouth is. It's putting its money where its mouth is by putting important money into vital infrastructure projects, like the $10 billion in the National Rail project, which will impact upon my electorate of Fisher. This federal government is making $10 billion available for state governments and territory governments to bid for rail projects. And I once again call on the Palaszczuk Labor government to bid for the duplication of the North Coast Railway line between Beerburrum and Nambour. It's an absolute no-brainer. I'll be writing to the Deputy Premier of Queensland later this week, calling upon her to take advantage of that $10 billion. Well, we don't all live in the cities, mate. See, that's what's wrong with you lot over there. There are a lot more people that live in the bush and the regions than live in the cities. We don't all live in the city. It's not all about city folk. And we believe on this side of the House that people who live in the bush and people who live in the regions should be given the opportunity to have world-class infrastructure. And that's what we're trying to do. Equally, this federal government has allocated $650 million to the Bruce Highway upgrades south of Caloundra. That's on top of the $743 million we've already contributed. So, and why I'm talking about this, Mr Deputy Speaker, is because for every dollar that this government, for every dollar that a state government spends on infrastructure, my sums tell me, my investigations tell me over the last 30 years, but particularly now, somewhere between 60 cents and another dollar is being spent on union corruption. Now, I hear my colleague over the other side of the fence there arguing with me But, well, he says I'm wrong, but that's fine. You'd expect him to stick up for his union mates. But for every dollar, there is union corruption in this state, in this country, and in the state of Queensland in particular. But I'll go back to other states shortly in a moment. For every dollar. You see, what we are, Mr Deputy Speaker, trying to do in this place is clean up infrastructure and building. We want to ensure that every dollar we spend goes to the project at hand, whether it's building rail or roads. And so let's just have a look at some of the problems that we've got in this country. So if you look at the Commonwealth Games, some of the sites that are being built down on the Gold Coast, The Australian reported on May 9 that a construction union could be fined as little as $40,000 for holding coercive, twice-daily, 2-hour stop-work meetings that halted construction at the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games site and cost the head contractor $700,000. They've gone very quiet over the other side of the chamber. For 19 days last year, Queensland's Construction, Forestry, Mining and Energy Union held 2 meetings every day at the $126 million Carrara Sports and Recreation project in an attempt to force contractor Hanson & Yuncken into the enterprise agreement. Federal Court Judge John Reeves has already ruled the action was unlawful, but construction watchdog, the ABCC, that this government's put back on the beat, recently asked for the union to be fined $162,000. The Commonwealth Games sites were brought effectively to a halt by this coercive conduct undertaken by the CFMEU, but it doesn't stop there. The Federal Circuit Court has, on the 15th of December, handed down penalties totalling $37,500 against the CFMEU and its former Queensland President, Dave Hanna, for threatening ongoing industrial action at a Brisbane construction site unless a construction firm agreed to sign a secret deal with the union.
Backhanders.
6 working days were impacted by unprotected industrial action at the Brooklyn on Brooks apartment project in Brisbane in April 2014, prompting the issue of a return-to-work order by the Fair Work Commission. But these sort of activities aren't just going on in Queensland. In Western Australia, the CFMEU and its most senior national leader, Dave Noonan, and top Western Australian officials were fined $277,000 over unlawful blockades at the $1.2 billion Children's Hospital at Perth.
Do it to a kids' hospital.
At a children's hospital at Perth. And this is the same thing they did at the Lady Salento Hospital in Brisbane. You in the Labor Party and the CFMEU had no shame. You will grind projects to a halt, even if it's hospitals. Mr Noonan but let's just have a listen. Let's just have a listen to what it was about, rather than be talking about asbestos or whatever it was that was shouted over the other side. Mr Noonan admitted he organised a protest of 400 people to blockade the Children's Hospital site on July 18, 2013, forcing John Holland to abandon a critical concrete pour involving up to 45 truckloads of concrete and slurry.
Drop it on the union rep.
As a builder, I can tell you that would have cost millions of dollars. The National Secretary with WA Branch Secretary Mick Buchan and then Assistant Secretary Joe McDonald admitted they incited the blockade. Because John Holland would not sign a whole-of-site CFMEU agreement that paid subbies at least the same as employees. Refused to do it Well, that's because they're subcontractors, because they incited the blockade of a building site. They admitted it. Unbelievable. But wait, we go on. CFMEU slugged $540,000 for Fair Work breaches in Adelaide. In Adelaide. Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide. Oh, the whole world's against the CFMEU. Construction union will have to pay more than $540,000 in penalties for unlawful conduct. Unlawful. Are you supporting that unlawful conduct?
Yep.
In South Australia after losing an appeal?
Order! I'll remind the member for Fisher, remarks go through the chair.
Thank you.
And I'll ask the others listening here to keep their voices down. Thank you.
Mr Deputy Chair, I could go on.
Go on.
I could go on.
Extension. More.
But it's
The member for
important that we
Bowman's not
understand.
listening.
It's important we understand why this bill, the Fair Work and Amendment Corrupting Benefits Bill, is so important. It's because of these exact coercive conduct of unions that unions try and muscle and strong-arm builders. Now, some builders, unfortunately, kowtow and buckle to that sort of conduct. And that's very unfortunate. But on this side of the chamber, we believe that no one is above the law, because for every corrupt payment that is received by the union, someone had to write the cheque. And we want to ensure on this side of the House that we disincentivise as much as possible companies from writing those cheques. So we've introduced the ABCC. We've introduced Registered Organisations Act. We've introduced the new Building Code.
Yeah.
We've stopped and are committed to preventing corporate tax evasion. Oh, he laughs. Still want to talk some more, do you? Sorry, through you, Mr Chair. We want to ensure that as much as humanly possible that we try and prevent payments being made, corrupt payments being made to unions. Because if you take the sugar off the table, if you disincentivise the person from writing the cheque in the first place with very significant fines and jail terms, we are confident that the CFMEU will no longer be able to muscle and strong-arm these building companies from trying to just simply do their job, because that's what they're trying to do. Building companies are trying to do their job, but the CFMEU and other unions are holding them to ransom. Unfortunately, we have to come in with strong legislation to prevent that sort of conduct from happening. We are going on this side of the House after both unions who break the law and companies that break the law. We on this side of the House are not anti-unions. I've said this many times before. We are not anti-unions. What we are is anti-union corruption. We are about anti-business corruption, and that's why we're introducing these very, very strong penalties that will give penalties of up to 10 years imprisonment or fines of $900,000 for an individual or $4.5 million for a company that enters into these corrupt payments. We on this side of the House, unlike those opposite, don't look after the unions that break the law. We set heavy penalties for businesses that break the law, and for any business in the building industry that is considering writing a cheque for hush money to get the job on the go, to keep the unions off their back. I want to talk to those directors right here, right now. Is it worth facing a $900,000 personal fine? Is it worth your company being fined $4.5 million? Is it worth you, Director, Mr or Mrs Director, going to jail for 10 years if you write that cheque to keep the union off your back? I commend the bill to the House.